What really defines a student's success? It's a question that seems simple, but has followed us over time. Is it the math grade? The average needed to get into college? Or is true success a young person's ability to leave school and not fall apart at the first challenge? That's the big question, isn't it? Because we all know people who were brilliant students and then had a lot of difficulties in life. And the opposite is also true. Exactly. And that's why today we're going to dive into a set of questions that address an educational model that tries to go a bit beyond grades. It's called social-emotional learning, or SEL for short in English. And the information we have, which we will detail regarding its structure and application, puts a central challenge on the table. Everyone agrees that skills like empathy or resilience are important. The big question is, how do you teach something so personal in a systematic way? In a classroom? Without it becoming artificial or forced? That's the big paradox. We want to shape people, not robots, but education needs a system, a method. Finding that balance is the key. So let's analyze this issue. And let's start right at the foundation. What exactly is this social-emotional learning? Is it just a trendy new name for good manners, or is it something more structured? This really is the right question to start with, because there are a lot of doubts surrounding this topic. It's not about teaching people to say please and thank you. The sources we consulted define SEL as an intentional educational process. The central idea, and we're quoting here, is to give children and adults the tools to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. In other words, it's the internal architecture that allows us to deal with the world. Internal architecture. It's a powerful image. And it's important to say that, although the model from the organization SEL that we're going to discuss is the best known, it's not the only one. There are other approaches that place more emphasis, for example, on mindfulness practices or on connections with social justice. However, the core of what we're going to talk about today, these 5 key competencies, is almost universally accepted as the foundation. So it's not a one-size-fits-all recipe, but there are essential ingredients. And these ingredients are these 5 competencies. The first one, according to our sources, is self-awareness. The ability to notice your own thoughts and emotions. To notice when you're frustrated and understand why. It seems simple at first glance, but it's not simple at all. It's the foundation of everything. It's the beginning of art and even Socratic brought into the classroom. If we don't have the ability to pause and identify, for example, that what we're feeling right now is anxiety, and that it's being caused by this test. So if we can't make this identification, any other strategy runs the risk of failing. It's the diagnosis before the treatment. But attention, this raises a question for me. It's one thing for an adult to go to therapy to become more self-aware. It's something completely different for a school to try to teach this to a 10-year-old child. How do you teach self-awareness? Isn't there a risk of it being evasive? That's the most common criticism, and it's very relevant. The approach described in the documentation is not therapeutic. It's pedagogical. It's not about a teacher acting as a psychologist. It's about creating consistent practices. For example, starting the day with a 1-minute emotional check-in, where students think about and, if they wish, share in a single word how they feel, or using reflection journals. These are small rituals that create the habit of looking inward, of naming emotions. Isn't that invasive? It's giving them a vocabulary for their inner world. That makes it clearer to us. It's about creating the habit rather than forcing confusion. This way, the approach in school makes more sense. After we identify our emotions and realize we're frustrated, the next step is not to throw the book at the wall. That's where the second skill comes in, self-management. It's the second skill, SEL self-management. Self-management is what you do with the information that self-awareness has given you. It's the ability to regulate those emotions and impulses, manage stress, control frustration, but also, this is crucial for learning, the ability to motivate ourselves, to be disciplined, and to set goals. The example of the student who doesn't give up on a difficult math problem is perfect. Self-management is the muscle of resilience. But here there may be a danger, the risk that this idea of self-management is interpreted as students having to fend for themselves, a kind of figure-it-out-on-your-own mentality. Where does the teacher's support come in when a student is struggling? That is a dangerous distortion, and the sources are clear in opposing it. Self-management does not mean self-sufficiency at all costs. On the contrary, good self-management starts with this. It is precisely the self-awareness to recognize facts like, I can't solve this on my own. I need to ask for help. Of course, the goal is not to create students who suppress themselves, but rather students who have a range of strategies. Take a deep breath, pause, and most importantly, know who to ask for support and when. The teacher's role is to teach these strategies and to be that safe harbor. It's not about shifting responsibility, it's about empowering the student. This distinction is fundamental. Empower, don't abandon. Up until now, we've been very focused on the self, but the model will then turn outward. The third SEL competency is social awareness. Here, the example is showing empathy toward classmates in difficulty. Yes, it's the big shift in perspective from me to us. And social awareness is much more than just being nice. It's the ability to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, to understand social and ethical norms, and to recognize and value diversity.
It's understanding that my experience of the world is not the only one. Empathy is a beautiful concept, but we all know schools where it doesn't go beyond a poster on the wall. What does the existing literature say about what goes wrong when trying to teach empathy, and why doesn't it work? What fails most of the time is the lack of authenticity and practice. You don't learn empathy by reading a definition on the board. You learn it through experiences. Sources mention methods like cooperative learning, where students really have to work with different classmates to achieve a goal. They talk about discussions on ethical dilemmas. And above all, you learn by watching adults practice it. If a teacher shows empathy towards a student, that has an impact 1,000 times greater than any theory. The school's culture has to live what it preaches. The culture has to live what it preaches, and this seems to be the common thread. So here, the connection to the next SEL competency becomes obvious. If social awareness is understanding what others feel, then relationship skills are an instruction manual for acting on that without creating a disaster. That's the connection. It's a great way to address the issue. Social awareness and relationship skills. Relationship skills are the active and practical part of social interaction. What does this include? Clear communication, active listening, cooperation, constructive conflict resolution. For example, working in a group while respecting different opinions. This is the daily training ground for that. How many of us, as adults, struggle with this at work? More often than we'd like. Because knowing how to resolve a conflict isn't about avoiding the discussion. It's about knowing how to disagree with an idea without attacking the person. It's about looking for solutions where both sides win. These are highly sophisticated skills that need to be explicitly taught and practiced. We can't assume that students learn these skills on their own. Right? And this brings us to the fifth and final skill, which I see as the grand finale, where everything comes together: responsible decision-making. It's the culmination without a doubt. Because to make a responsible decision, a person needs to use all the other skills. They need self-awareness to understand how their values influence their choices. And self-regulation so they don't make decisions on impulse. Social awareness, to anticipate the consequences for others. And relationship skills to communicate that decision. For example, deciding to help a classmate instead of ignoring them is a good illustration of the ethical dimension. It's almost like a mental checklist, ethics before action. To make decisions in a responsible way. It's about analyzing the situation, identifying the problem, thinking of various solutions, evaluating the consequences, and finally, reflecting on the decision. It's a complex process. And
this brings us to the central question that was raised at the beginning. What sets a good student apart? And how does a school take all of this and turn it into reality? That's the hard part. Because a list of 5 skills looks nice, but how do you actually put it into practice? What does the documentation we found tell us about practical implementation? First and foremost, it tells us that it can't just be a subject called in for missions on Tuesday mornings. That's doomed to fail. CL has to be decided throughout the entire school structure. At various levels, starting with the most obvious one, the classroom. The sources we consulted mention, for example, curricular integration. I know what it means to teach self-management in a physical education class, or to deal with the frustration of losing a game. Or to teach social awareness in a history class by analyzing a conflict from different points of view. There's no need to create a new curriculum, but rather to look at the existing curriculum through the lens of SEL. But that alone is not enough. Because it's necessary to go beyond the classroom, much further beyond. The second level is the school as a whole. The culture, the policies, the environment. This means, for example, that disciplinary rules are not just punitive, but integrative. Instead of simply punishing a student, the aim is to understand what happened and how the relationship can be repaired. It means that the adults in the school, teachers, staff, administration, also model these skills. There's no point in talking about emotion management with students if teachers can't manage their own emotions. Which brings us to the third level, which seems to us the most challenging. The involvement of families and the community. The experiences already carried out speak of authentic partnerships. What does that actually mean in practice, so it's not just an empty phrase? This often ends up being the Achilles heel of many programs. An authentic partnership, according to what the sources describe, goes far beyond just sending an email home saying, "This month we're working on empathy." It means organizing workshops for parents on the same topics so that a common language is created. It means that when there's a problem, the school and the family work as a team, not as adversaries. It's an immense ongoing job that requires a lot of trust. It's a complete ecosystem. It's not the sole responsibility of the Portuguese teacher or any other subject teacher. It's a concerted effort between the classroom, the entire school, families, and even community organizations. Only when all these pieces are aligned does SEL stop being just an initiative and become the way we do things at our school. The model is ambitious, which brings us to the final question. The promised benefits seem fantastic. Better academic performance, less bullying, more cooperation. But a skeptic might ask, do the sources present concrete data proving that SEL is the direct cause of this success? Or is it all just correlated with other factors, such as the fact that schools adopting these programs already have more investment or more motivated teachers to begin with? That's the right question, and the answer is complex. Isolating a single variable in education is almost impossible. However, what studies conducted so far show is an extremely strong and consistent correlation. The logic behind all of this is very solid. A student with better self-management is able to focus more in class. Therefore, their academic performance tends to improve as they become more self-confident. A school with greater social awareness has a safer and more inclusive environment, which naturally leads to a reduction in conflicts and bullying. Therefore, it's not so much a direct cause and effect like cause B, but more of an ecosystem effect. Everything is connected. SEL is not a magic pill. It's about creating the basic conditions for learning to take place. It's like trying to build a house on unstable ground. You can have the best materials, but the structure will still shake. SEL is the foundation. It stabilizes the emotional and social ground so that knowledge can be built solidly. That's why the conclusion from the sources is clear. This is not just a nice extra to do when there's time. It's a central pillar of the educational mission of the 21st century. Self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. It seeks to shape not just good students, but more complete, resilient, and empathetic human beings. And it became very clear that its success is not isolated. It depends on an ecosystem that connects the classroom, the school, families, and the community. Everything is interconnected. And that leaves us with a final reflection. The sources we analyze focus, and rightly so, on how to implement SEL for students. But this raises a provocative question. What would happen if these same principles of self-awareness, empathy, and responsible decision-making were applied explicitly and continuously to the adults in the system, teachers, principals, and even lawmakers? How could that transform the very nature of education?